Alrighty, everybody. Today we are back with a unique sort of content input. Today we are reviewing the entirety of the show Dawson's Creek. It was basically on air from 1998 to 2003, so a 5 year span, pretty good, 6 seasons, over 100 episodes, I believe, and quite frankly, a very divisive show. And a lot of people might be saying this is kind of a deviant sort of upload. This is kind of weird, bro. Isn't that kind of gay? You watch Dawson's Creek? Well, fuck you, faggot, first of all. Second of all, I personally think that this show is Kino, all right? And I'm sick and tired of watching stuff from the 2000s that references shows that I haven't seen, right? So, for example, Dawson's Creek. I've never seen that. I kept hearing about it. What is that? In third grade, I always kept wondering what's a trapper keeper until I looked it up. So I just need to find out. I have a lust for knowledge, and part of that is watching shows from 20 years ago. And I'm sick and tired of pretending it's not a good show. All right, so I've been catching a lot of shit for watching it. I know. So I tell my friends, oh yeah, I'm doing this. Oh yeah, you're playing that? Oh yeah, what are you watching? Oh, I'm watching. They're like, what? Yeah, anyway, the point is that Dawson's Creek is a great show, and it has a lot of underlying reasons why it is, and there's a lot of meta ironic things in it, and I think that I kind of ironically like it, but I also connect with it in a way, and I don't want to sound like I'm quitting reviews or being some fucking soy jack faggot about this, but I definitely relate to some of the characters to a certain extent, and I also think that the show picks up at certain points in a way that others don't. And to actually get under the surface, I'll start talking about the plot. So basically, we do have, obviously, I assume you've seen the show if you're watching this, but so we have Dawson Leary, who's this teenager who's into film, and he's a very straight edge white guy, right? And he has a normal family, and largely speaking, he lives in this small, invented, made up suburb of Boston, and of course, he lives close to all these people, and there's a main group of four friends. First, you have Pacey, right, which is his best friend. And then you have, I believe, the girl he's kissing on the picture that you're watching right now, which is going to be, I believe, Joey, right? So that's a boy name. I don't know why they picked that name, but I guess it's serviceable. Anyway, the point is that you had Joey be in love with Dawson this entire time, but they were friends basically before they were sexually aware. So they sleep together, at the age of like 15, but they don't do anything. And over the show, it develops the subcontext of, obviously sexual arousal and kind of like, obviously you're a 15-year-old boy, you're going to wake up next to a girl that's pretty like her and you're going to want to do shit. But obviously Dawson is so naive and he is so pure that unlike 80% of boys in that position, and fuck it, I'd say 90% of them, he doesn't take advantage of anything, and she's left with the desire, but obviously they've been friends for a decade at that point, ever since they were like 5. So she doesn't want to ruin the friendship, so to speak. And so we introduce the fourth character in the cast, which is going to be Jen Lindley, who's this blonde girl played by Michelle Williams, and she's probably, it's arguable who's more attractive between her and Joey, but I don't know. I honestly don't know. Anyway, the point is that she's this girl from New York, and she acts very well, and you'd expect him to get with that girl, and he clearly does, and Dawson does hook up with this girl, but ultimately there's a sense of innocence that she sees in him and that she desires, and she ultimately opens up in that she was a slut. She lost virginity at like 12, and she was drunk, and her parents were neglectful of her, and overall her parentage was terrible, and she started living with her religious grandmother in Cape Side. And part of the problem with that being that she's an atheist apparently, and she butts heads with her grandmother, and it's very sad to see because obviously the grandmother wants the best for her, but she's stupid, and it's kind of hard to watch. But overall, we see more characters introduced over time. Obviously, we have the main three, which would be Dawson, Pacey, and Joey, and clearly you see the subtext of a love triangle forming later on. But for the meantime, there's the indecision between Dawson to go between Joey and Jen, and I think that's somewhat interesting. Obviously, most guys aren't in the position to have two pretty girls after him, but he's in a niche scenario, before online dating, so it's not as black-pilled as today, where basically, a guy who's at least, no homo, but I think Dawson Leary is an average-looking guy. I don't think he's anything special. So for him to have two pretty girls after him is like I said, a niche scenario where obviously, you grow up with one, so she gets attached to you in a way that she wouldn't otherwise. And the new girl, which, lives in a small town. And if you're a guy in a small town, you usually have a better chance in getting girls because there's not so many to pick from the hypergamous perspective. So that's that. Now, in terms of other love interest, I believe that Pacey gets with his high school teacher as well, and I think they call her Tamara or something. And I think she's attractive, and there's a motif or a niche of the movies where they have like the student screwing the female teacher, and they explore this in this show. I don't know how new of an invention it was at that point, but I think that was also interesting. Dealing with the boy obviously wants to sleep with her, and the woman is reluctant to because obviously the age gap and all that, but she relents, and their relationship there, and the whole I'm robbing your innocence, and but the perverted sense of that's a good thing. And I don't know, I think that's kind of, it was cool to watch for sure, but I don't relate to it at all insofar as why would a well-adjusted 35-year-old woman that's pretty get with a high schooler? I don't know, other than for her either having like relationship issues past the first date, or being very perverted. And I don't know where she would get the niche or the fetish of 15-year-old boys. At least if I were a girl, I would rather adult men, right? I mean, I seriously don't understand that. But beyond that, I think that you move on in the plot, and of course you have the Joey background, which is pretty bleak as well when you're talking about the father being arrested, and they don't really explain why. I believe they have the mother that died of cancer or something like that, and that's all obviously pretty sad for her. And that kind of goes to show how fucked up her life is. And then there's also a racial undertone in the show which they wouldn't broach today, and that is that she has an older sister, one that is probably in her late 20s, who's living with her boyfriend, who's a black guy. And of course the black guy, they mention that in the show. They'll be like, oh, that's Joey and her sister's black boyfriend. They always point out black boyfriend. And I don't want to sound like a libtard, but that is interesting that they point that out. I think that gets into I think people do consider the race of who's dating who, and I think it kind of goes like to show that when you look at Joey, it's like, well, your dad's in jail, your mom's dead, and your sister's dating a black guy, and you live with them. And that's something to be looked down upon. And I mean, I guess vaguely it should. I mean, that because it does correlate with being poor and being white trash and all that. But I think that is a little sad of a backstory for her. And because of these adversities, you tend to see her personality revolve around being witty and sort of standoffish, and being very, very pushy insofar as not. I don't know. She's very indecisive, but at the same time, she has a certain feistiness that a lot of men like for whatever reason. I don't, and and you'll see this in the show a lot. So that's her. She has a very troubled back story. Now, she is innocent, right? Jen had a bad parentage, and as a result, she became a slut. Whereas you had Joey, who had no parentage and was pure, but had these emotional attachment problems, which most people aren't self-aware of, but I could read into the subtext of the plot. Now, in terms of who else? Pacey, yeah, of course he has. They don't even mention his parents until like the third season, I believe, and I think they did that on purpose because they didn't want to expand the cast too much. I don't think they wanted to focus too much on that, but ultimately, I do think that they did broach it. And so he has this alcoholic father, and he has a mother who I guess left the family or something. They don't show her, I believe, and he also has siblings that they mention occasionally, but they don't see until like the fourth or fifth season. And eventually, you get to the point where you see these people, these characters, and especially Pacey, act in a way that is reminiscent of how their parents treat them, and you see the insecurities for what they are. And obviously, Pacey's insecurity is that he's a failure, and he wants the father's validation, but he never gets it because the father thinks he's a failure. And part of that is because the father didn't raise him right in the first place, so of course he's going to be a failure. But the father is delusional in that he's an alcoholic, so he flees from the problem. So instead of saying, my son needs help, I should probably help tutor him or something like that, he just lets that go. And also forgot to mention that Pacey's brother also is a cop, and he's supposed to be like this, again, no homo, he looks like Matt Gaetz but more handsome. And he's clearly and then they have this repertoire and this like back and forth of like, oh, you're gay, bro. Where's your girlfriend? All that, and that also goes to show kind of the another layer of his family, how fucked up it is, where you're unironically calling your brother gay even though there's no proof of that other than the lack of a girlfriend. And at least I wouldn't want to be called gay, so I mean that's a dick move, but ultimately I guess brothers are like that. I don't have a brother, so I wouldn't know. The point is that you see, again, I keep saying this, but there's more layers than most people understand, and I'm kind of just explaining it because as I think about it, I see more and more nuances to the show, which I love to see. Um, so going towards the end of the season, I don't even remember what happens, but I think they start off as sophomores in high school, then juniors, then seniors, then college, and then the second year. And all along this way, there's different characters that are added into the fold, which I don't really care to mention because this review is going too long. But the point is that they play into certain stereotypes. Obviously, you add Andy McPhee and you add Jack McPhee. Jack, who's a closeted homosexual at the beginning. So this show, at the in the late '90s, early 2000s, was coming at a point where, of course, the gay marriage stuff was discouraged, and good on them for that. But you do see these gay people sort of becoming obviously flamboyant, but also not declaring outright that they're gay because they don't want to get stigmatized for it. And so, like, at the time, I think you had people that were famous, like Ricky Martin or David Bowie, who are obviously fruitcakes on their own and have these complex orientations going on. And the show kind of goes out of its way to show the stigma of what it would be like being gay 20 years ago. And I understand that as something that was probably maybe not for the best, but definitely preferable than what we have now. Obviously, the gay stuff is out of control, but you see and you're supposed to feel bad for Jack because definitely his parentage was lacking. And there's also a stereotype with Jen's parents and with Jack's parent, with his father, that being that the aloof rich dad who's too busy, who has his own vices to deal with, who doesn't care for his kids because he has bigger issues, bigger fish to fry, at least in their own head. In the pursuit of monetary benefit, obviously you're neglecting your children, and that bites him in the ass. And in fact, there's a part in the second season or the third where Jack specifically says, I couldn't control being gay, and the father says, I feel bad because if I were there for you, you probably wouldn't be gay. And I think that's the father basically relenting that, what, I thought because I was there that you wouldn't turn out this way, but if I were there for you as a masculine role model, you probably wouldn't be gay. But of course, now here's a liberal part of the show that I don't like, and that is that they let the narrative run with Jack like not choosing to be gay, which is perplexing to me, obviously, because if you think it's okay to be gay, like why do you have to justify it by being born that way? Could you just not rationalize it by just choosing it? But anyway, you see this with a lot of media, pre 2005, where the homosexuality obviously isn't accepted by most people, but what the gays will say is I didn't choose to be this way. And it's like, well, how would you know? Like you obviously can't prove that genetically. And I just think it's anti-Christian to say that you're born gay. And even if you are, it doesn't mean that you have to live out your orientation. Just stay in the fucking closet then, okay? I don't want to deal with your gayness. Like if you have those urges, just try to suppress them, okay? Because by that logic, a person could just say, oh, I was born to like kids. It's like, no, nigga, you weren't, bro. I doubt that. I really doubt that. So yeah, that's an unfortunate part of the show, but overall, I think they do broach the gay subject pretty well. I think they add nuance to Jack's personality as a guy who, for example, dates Joey and tries to like her, but he just simply cannot. When it counts, like he couldn't sleep with her. He had, he was soft and all that. So I think that's important to figure out. They broach the subject of like having fake girlfriends, gay guys trying to be straight and just not getting there, and it kind of shows that there's deeper issues that you cannot compensate for just like dating a girl and kissing her and like pretending like you're okay. So I think that's kind of cool. Anyway, going on, Andy McPhee obviously crazy as fuck. She's like, so her brother died and she like sees like she like hallucinates the brother. She has to be on these pills just to act normal, and she's very annoying generally. And when Pacey wasn't getting any pussy from his teacher, he had to resort to getting with Andy, and that makes her basically relevant to the story. and because Jack was an outcast for being a homo, and he got added to the friend group by proxy, burp, and all of the people in the Dawson's friend group are okay with him being gay, which is cringe, but whatever. And they go ahead and what else? I mean, I keep forgetting. I literally finished season 6 like 2 hours ago, but I already forgot a lot about it, and it's part of the problem with binging. But anyway, the point is still that they keep adding characters to confuse the narrative, and the basic narrative is that of Dawson getting with Joey at the very end. That's what it is, and a lot of people may ask, well, who should Joey have picked? And I find that interesting because if the main character is Dawson, it should be up to him, right? That's the whole narrative, but no, it's Joey. Anyway, she ends up picking Dawson at the end, I think, and I think that's fine. But her vacillating between several different guys is kind of gay. I think it's sort of, I don't know, it's kind of unrealistic for her to, I don't know how to make this point clear. The point is that the show ends, and spoiler alert if you have not seen the show from 20 years ago, but it ends with Dawson going ahead in his film career, and then getting emotional support from all of his friends, including Joey, in a platonic sort of way, and it doesn't end with them getting together, is what I was trying to say earlier. And I think that's kind of unfortunate, honestly, because clearly she would have gone with one of the boys, right, you would think, but instead she virtually just like connects and bonds with all of them, and then they're back to being platonic with each other. And then every so often they'll have these affairs with each other, and it's like, to me, pick a lane. Obviously it's not good to eat where you shit and all that, so for them to be making out with each other when they're in the same friend group, I think that's very naive. And I think the show portrays that pretty well insofar as they keep vacillating between each other, like I said, and it leads to a lot of drama that's unnecessary, frankly. And they also try to date other people that aren't in the friend group, but they don't have that same connection, so it doesn't feel as real to them. And I think that's kind of cool to include because obviously you're going to feel more of a connection to the girl you knew since you were 5, but at the same time, it also broaches the topic of like, okay, well, how do I say this? So basically, they didn't get together when they were like 12 or 13, which is what would normally happen, and they wait until like several years after that, and there's this common pattern of them feeling this tension between them but not acting on it, and then it boils over, and then they feel something. So it kind of shows that there's a I don't know, a lack of motivation to not fall into the same pit traps. And as far as they try to get away from each other, they keep coming back. And I think that's the main magnetism of the show, which is that the essential love dualism, the connection between the two main characters is inseparable. And basically, the vague notion of the show is that love triumphs all, which is not really true. I don't see this friend group surviving in real life. I think that it's overly optimistic. And overall, it is kind of soapy and it is kind of blue-pilled. I do like the show, though, and I would rate it an 8 out of 10 overall. Why? Well, I think the first 4 seasons are great. I think the 5th season's mediocre, and the 6th season is definitely not good. I say that because in the 6th season, after they went to college, it just kind of, they added so many new characters, it got out of funk, and a lot of the character traits that were kind of cute at the beginning got annoying, including, I would say, Andy McPhee. Like, I'm pretty sure they don't even have her in the second part of the 6th season because she's kind of irrelevant, and I found her annoying. Another part of the show was they killed off Joey Dawson's dad, which was a pretty big plot point, and I felt a lot of empathy for him at the time, as a fictional character, because they definitely did add a lot of character development to these people, to the point where you would feel some sort of vague emotional stance on something such as a fake character dying. So that is good for a show to do insofar as being effective at making you connect with the characters you see on the screen. And in terms of pacing, obviously you could tell this was made in the 90s, because when you see the 10 episode format on Netflix, like you see shows in modernity, you tend to notice that they're more like movies, whereas this is definitely a show where they don't want to move the narrative too much, so they have a lot of these A, B, and C plots to kind of pad out the time. So you kind of have to skip through those so you can get to the point. And after the 4th season, I found myself skipping a lot more of the show because it got more boring and monotonous, over time. In either that or they kept on adding a salad of new characters, hoping that it would stick in a way that would taste well to the or be palatable to the viewer. But I personally did not relate to a lot of these characters towards the end of the show. And I think by the end of the fourth, I think they kind of just like ran out of content. I could tell. So because of that, the overall aggregate, which would have been probably like a 9, is down to like a 7. Honestly, now that I think about it, I just think that the show went on too long, and I'm glad that they canceled it after the 6th season because it just simply wasn't good anymore. It was running out of content. It was clearly like a high school centric show, and I think what it did at the time was pretty good. Conveying all these characters, and I feel like it entertained people, which is the point. There are some liberal things that I mentioned with the gay stuff and the premarital sex, but even still, I find the right wing aspect of a lot of blue pill stuff, and I think John Doyle says this pretty well about Beauty and the Beast. But I do see like the whole Joey sleeping with guys, in a premarital context, but obviously not wanting to put out for any guy, and I think that's kind of quirky because I see a lot of college girls now just sleeping with guys for the heck of it, whereas a girl like Joey, who's from a suburb or something, is able to at least form a actual connection with men before that she sleeps with them, which I think is way more justified and reasonable than what we see nowadays, in public. So the time era of the show is very surreal. I, for whatever reason, connect a lot with things that happened between the late 90s and the mid 2000s. I feel like I don't know, it feels like I'm visibly in them. And I think it's because when I was a toddler, I kind of remember, 2005, 2006. And so, 2002, all that, like that feels like vaguely at home. And because I vaguely know what it's like, I can also project what I want in that era because I do have that lack of experience as just a little kid in that time of the show. So because of that, I feel an extra sense of surreal ambience and the time period. And I think that makes it stronger. And the overall goal for me to watch the show was to kind of get the gist of what people were talking about on the off chance they mention the show, which is what I do in large part when I consume media. Now I get it. This show was a story about teenage love and the consequences of it and all that. And I think it was quite excellent, honestly. 8 out of 10. It went out of its prime. Frankly, after they graduated high school, I think it went downhill, but it's still a good show on aggregate. It's kind of like, Brett Favre's career. Obviously he didn't do as well in his last year than he did his 8th year theoretically, but still a good career, still a good show on aggregate. I like it. I rated it 7 out of 10 now that I think about it, and I want to know what you guys think down below in the comments. So yeah, I'm done. Bye.